back with another recap and review of Chapter 2 for Ahsoka, titled Toil and Trouble. This is 3PN. We're your host, Jake.
I am Shane.
Alrighty, so we're just going to jump right into it. Just from where we left off on episode 1, we kind of left with Sabine getting attacked by Shin. She kind of got ran through with a lightsaber, and that's where we pick up right away in episode 2. We start with her being Sabine's unconscious, kind of recovering. Ahsoka is in the room. She's kind of reading her thoughts and kind of hears that it's getting a little dark. It wakes her up, tells Ahsoka that basically she messed up. She unlocked the map. It's a quick scene, really, in the beginning. But I guess I have a question for you, Shane. Obviously, you're being a little more in tune with the Star Wars lore. Is that more of like hinting towards Ahsoka's, I guess, tendencies to kind of use some of the dark side, or is that something that other Jedi can do? Is like kind of read her thoughts as she's sleeping, things like that?
Well, that scene sort of hints to a couple of things. First off, to answer your question, yes, when two individuals are in tune with each other, whether they're light side or dark side, they can use the Force to create sort of a telepathic connection. You see that
Okay.
again in one of the other episodes when Ahsoka's looking for Sabine, and she's like, "Well, maybe our connection is strong enough." Ooh, and she finds her. But the way that Ahsoka sort of is forcing herself into Sabine's mind, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a dark side move. Maybe kind of a little bit, but I think what that is really showing is Ahsoka's lack of ability at trusting somebody.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the big, I think, theme of this episode too. Is you can really tell Ahsoka does not trust Sabine at all,
and for good reason, right? I mean, right. Ahsoka was betrayed by the Council multiple times, and then obviously she feels betrayal from her master with everything that he went through, and so she hasn't had a whole lot of people to trust. One thing that we do know is that before this series takes place, Ahsoka spent about 10 years trying to teach her new Padawan here the ways of the Force, and very unsuccessfully, and it ended on very poor terms. So once again, she's feeling betrayed. I feel like part of the reason why she wasn't able to teach her that well is both Ahsoka never finished her training, She
that's
left
a good
while
point.
she left while she was still a Padawan. So everything that she knows from the Force after Anakin is self-taught, really. Maybe she's found a few Jedi holocrons or even Sith holocrons and learned from that. And obviously she's ran into Luke a couple of times, but she's a self-taught Jedi.
Well, she wouldn't even consider herself as a Jedi, right?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I guess we can say she's a self-taught Force wielder.
Right.
And she has not been trained on how to train.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
The only example she really has is Anakin, and once again, he taught her to be a soldier, not necessarily a Jedi.
Right.
So she's got trust issues, and she's got confidence issues, and she's got all these internal issues while she's trying to quasi be a mentor and teacher to Sabine, and due to like in the last episode, Sabine stole the holocron. Once again, Ahsoka's being betrayed. Or not the holocron, the map. So she's like does not trust Sabine, and she's like, okay, well, I need to figure out where her mind's at. I don't trust her. I feel like I need to train her, but let me just pry in there real quick and figure out what's really going on. And so I think that's what that is. That is just the writers trying to show the audience, like, hey, Ahsoka's not really in her right mind, and she's really crossing a line here, uh, forcibly prying into someone's mind.
Right.
That Jedi telepathic link is supposed to be a mutual two-way thing. That's why it actually worked later on in the series, because Sabine was open to it.
Right.
Sabine was currently like contemplating what was going on and trying to figure out how she could rectify what she's done with Ahsoka, because she wants to be uh, a better student, and she wants to be closer to Ahsoka. So it worked then because it was mutual. This time, it obviously disturbed Sabine. Like, it woke her up, because she
Right.
was like, ooh. So yeah, it just shows Ahsoka's shortcomings. Not necessarily that she's falling to the dark side.
Not like an evil tendency or whatever. Just kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
she's doing whatever she wants for whatever
yeah.
she seems
And
the greater good. Right.
and this is Disney Star Wars, right? When you look at the sequel trilogy, uh, even Rey, like, she forced lightning to a bunch of spaceships, right? There
Right.
there is a light side force lightning, but it's not blue. The blue force lightning traditionally is a Sith technique, which, if Rey's using that, technically she's using Sith powers, but I don't think Disney intended that to be a dark side move, so I don't think Disney is intending Ahsoka's usage of essentially a force manipulation to be a dark side move. Plus, I mean, you've got you in the original trilogy, you've got Obi-Wan, who's, these aren't the droids you're looking for. So mind
Right.
manipulation isn't necessarily a dark side usage or dark side power. It just depends on how you're using it, really.
I gotcha. Well, so they end that episode with Ahsoka kind of giving Sabine or end that scene, not the episode. Ahsoka kind of giving Sabine the cold shoulder, basically tells her that she's done enough, right, and she leaves.
Short
Um,
episode.
yeah, short episode. Yeah, it's been a long week. You can see where my mind's at. I'm
I feel you,
just
man.
surviving on coffee.
I just got back from like a 3 hour drive, so I'm right there with you.
All right, the next scene is Balon and Shin arrive at this temple-like structure on Cetos, seemingly going to give them the ability to read this map. All right, pretty short scene. I think he contacts Lady Morgan and tells her,
Mm-hmm.
they found it, right?
Yeah.
Back to Ahsoka, she's investigating at Sabine's home. I love this part. I thought this was kind of, and I don't remember if she could use this in like Rebels or whatever, but I thought it was a really cool kind of throwback to the newest Jedi Survivor game and whatever. She's basically using like Force echoes to kind of like sense what was happening around her. You know what I mean? Do you remember? Did you ever play that
Oh
game?
yeah, like she's like touching objects to try and read what's going
Yeah,
on.
and she can hear
Yep.
like the lightsabers clashing, her Sabine talking with Shin and things like that. And she's going through Sabine's house. Um, there was a droid still there that she somehow figured out. I don't know if I missed something, but she just kind of knew it was going to be there. It
Yeah.
dropped from the ceiling, chops its head off, right, and brings it back to Sabine.
So that's a not a common force power. Kind of like Anakin's ability to see the future.
Right.
Like, not every Jedi can do it. Just some of them. Some Jedi have that ability. So she does use that in Clone Wars a little bit,
Okay.
and this is kind of a more advanced usage of that. Uh, but still, like, yeah. So it's nothing. It's not anything new. It's really cool that they included it.
Yeah, no,
And
that's really cool.
I think she uses it a couple of times in this series to sort of figure out what's going on.
Right.
It also helps with like her general Jedi senses, right?
Yeah.
Most Jedi have the ability to sort of perceive the world around them like seconds into the future. That's how they can like sense when people are shooting at them and stuff like that. Or you notice that when they show Order 66, and almost all of the Jedi are like, "Ooh, something's happening."
There's a
Right?
disturbance,
Yeah.
right? That's what.
Right before the clone troopers like turn and fire, or like when they're on the speeder
Right.
bike back up and start shooting. Like, so most Jedi have like a precognitive ability, and Ahsoka's is just a little bit more powerful to where she can sort of
Definitely
sense.
seems like she's more advanced in Force abilities, more than I think like most I guess regular Jedi or whatever you would
Well,
call it, right?
yeah, I mean, she's been practicing the Force for longer than some of the masters have at this point. Like I said before, she had been teaching Sabine for 10 years. I read up on that earlier this week actually. So which kind of pushes our timeline back that we talked last episode uh, forward in time kind of significantly. But yeah, so
Yeah, yeah.
adult Ahsoka has been teaching um, Sabine for 10 years, and she was pretty sage in Rebels. Like Ahsoka was pretty far on in her training, like her self training, and her Jedi powers, like in Rebels, which is during the rebellion, obviously. So she's had that much more time to sort of master some of her abilities. Like Ahsoka,
Right.
regardless of her like self-identification and whether or not she affiliates with the Jedi, just by sheer knowledge of the Force and ability to manipulate the Force alone, she is definitely in like the master tier of her powers. Um, if not like getting close to like a grandmaster like Yoda was. She's very powerful. Still ignorant, right? Because she's not sure how to teach people.
Which is
And
dangerous, right?
yeah,
If you have all that kind of power and still
well,
be, oh,
an argument can be made that the Jedi Council as a whole was built off of ignorance, right? There's a reason
right,
they fell. Just because you're really powerful in one area doesn't mean you're always right all of the time,
right.
And I think Ahsoka knows that. Well, that's why she left the Jedi Order. Anakin knows that, which is why he's trying to create an order with different rules. Or not Anakin. Why do I keep getting Luke and Anakin mixed up in these videos? I hate myself. Luke knows that the Jedi were flawed, although Anakin also knew that the Jedi were flawed. Kind of why he turned.
Yeah,
But yeah. So
it seems to be a reoccurring theme.
yeah, knowledge of the Force doesn't necessarily mean you know how to deal with people.
Yeah, right.
So
That's
there's
very
that.
true.
Yeah. Uh, so basically, this scene is just showing like how developed she is in that particular skill. It's really cool how she does that, and it's really cool. I don't know. It's just a cool scene. It was
Yeah,
neat.
no, I definitely agree. I thought that was a pretty cool scene. All right, so back at I'm guessing it's some kind of med bay, med wing, wherever Sabine's at.
Yeah.
They do. She knows how to retrieve the data from this head of this droid to figure out
Mm-hmm.
where he came from. Little drama there. Everything's going to explode, and last second, okay, I got it. They do find out that the droid came from Corellia, so it's a New Republic shipyard, is what they say, and I believe it's Hera that says that it was Empire had, or Lady Morgan had some like, I don't know, manufacturing there or something along those lines.
Yes.
So
So back when the Sith were, or back when the Empire was a thing, Lady Morgan, I think we talked last episode about how she survived because she was a human and she worked for the Empire. She
right,
designed and built ships for the Empire. So that essentially was her manufacturing facility back when the Empire was a thing. And then when the
okay,
rebels took over, they retrofitted it to support, the New Republic. Um, Obviously, it's not all sunshine and rainbows as you continue to describe the scene.
yeah, right. So that's pretty much the end of the scene. Sabine's kind of willing to come and help. She wants to tag along, and Ahsoka still obviously back to the not trusting her, and so she kind of leaves, right? Um, Back to the star map with Balon and Shin, and now Lady Morgan. Uh, they are back on that. I believe it's Planet Cetos at that temple.
Yeah.
Lady Morgan takes the star map and kind of shows Balon and Shin that she can open it. You can tell she's using some kind of I don't know if you want to call it magic,
It
but
is. It's the Night Sisters
the
magic.
Night Sisters magic, right? They open the star map. She reveals where General Thrawn is possibly located. It's in another galaxy. Um, it does seem as they kind of as that scene kind of continues, you can kind of see Shin, especially, almost looking at her master, at Balon, kind of like um, very skeptical of Lady Morgan. I don't think she doesn't trust her. You can kind of tell just by her facial expressions. I don't think Balon really trusts her. You can kind of see he almost has his own agenda, and he's kind of going along with her. It was what it seems like. Lady Morgan kind of describes this pathway, and Balon recognizes it as the pathway to Peridia, which is like a fairy tale told to young children in the Jedi Order, just like fairy tale, wise tale, things like that. And he's kind of she reveals that it's real, right? It's not just a fairy tale. Um, and I do kind of like this because you can really tell, like, at least looking at Shin, like how much she does not like what's going on, but doesn't really say anything. She kind of knows her place, but she is not a fan of this Lady Morgan. What do you think about this scene?
It was interesting. So Shin is very much like the angsty teenager who ran away
Absolutely.
with this cool guy in a van, right? Um, so she doesn't trust uh the I already forgot her name, the witch lady.
Lady Morgan.
Yeah, she doesn't trust Lady Morgan because she doesn't understand Lady Morgan. She doesn't. Most people don't believe in witchcraft, which is kind of odd in a world where people can move stuff with their mind.
That's a good point.
But yeah, so she's very untrusting of this power that she doesn't understand, and of this lady that can wield it. There's not, to my knowledge, there's not a whole lot of pre-Ahsoka backstory that goes into Shin, but to my knowledge, or what it seems like to me, is that in Balon's pursuit of his own goals that so far have only really been alluded to, even at the end of this series, have only really been alluded to and not directly outright stated. Like it seems like he just found her on his way,
Right.
and he honestly he's using her just as much as he's using this witch.
Right.
He's got it. He's got his own goals. He's got a plan for those goals, and he's using everything in his repertoire as far as powers and skills go in order to do whatever it is that he wants to do. I don't think he really cares about finding Thrawn. I don't think he
No,
really
I don't
cares
either.
about. He doesn't really care about the Empire. He doesn't care about the Sith, clearly, but he's willing to use this little apprentice of his and her anger because it makes her very powerful on the dark side.
Do you think he cares about her as like a Jedi master would care about his apprentice?
I don't really get that vibe.
No.
Especially later on in the series when he's like, "Yeah, like go your own way, deuces." I don't think. I I think he knows that she's on like a dark side path, and
Right.
he just wants to use that.
Yeah, I can see that.
He is training her and he's teaching her. He's showing her self control. He's showing her patience, which are Jedi teachings. He's showing her all of these things that a Jedi Master would teach their Padawan, but at the end of the day, he's also gives zero cares about her digging into her emotions in order to make herself more powerful. So I don't think he sees her as a true apprentice, but she definitely sees him as her master.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah, I would agree
she,
with that,
yeah.
100%.
So she trusts Balon with her life, which is why when he's like, "Hey, back off, like chill out," she's like, "All right, cool. I don't trust this chick, but you seem cool with it, so I'm cool with it." You know.
Right.
And there's even some scenes when she's like fighting and stuff, and he's like, "Hey, let's beat feet," and she's like, "I really want to finish this battle, but Dad says that the lights are on, so it's time to go home."
Yeah.
So,
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. All right, so this scene ends with Lady Morgan talking to Balon about Merrick, and we assume at this shipyard with the last transport, and Balon sends Shin to basically assist Merrick, make sure everything goes smoothly.
yeah.
Um, cut to Hera and Ahsoka arriving at the shipyard. You kind of the first contact you have is this like shady manager type who you all automatically it's like, yeah, I don't trust this guy. I don't know what his deal is. Maybe he's just an asshole. I don't know, but definitely don't trust him. It's very shady.
Yep.
He reluctantly agrees with some convincing from Hera to take them to see that basically they're inspecting some of the old facilities that Lady Morgan was in charge of, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just want to see if anything's amiss. You kind of see them riding on that little, I don't even know what it was, that platform, and you
Yeah.
can see people like looking. And as soon as like Ahsoka or Hera were to like catch their glance, they'd quickly look away. You could just kind of get this like almost like a shady, like something's wrong kind of
Yeah.
vibe,
They all knew
right?
that they were doing stuff that they weren't supposed to do, and they were
Right,
trying to make sure no one saw them doing what they weren't supposed to do.
right. So that's a pretty quick scene. It cuts back to Sabine recovering in a med bay. There's some pretty good banter between Sabine and Hugh Yang, and they're basically talking about Sabine coming back to Ahsoka as an apprentice, and you know Sabine saying she doesn't want her, all that kind of they obviously have some trust issues there,
Yeah.
and Hugh Yang then basically tells her that she is the worst apprentice that he's ever come in contact with, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward
She's
from
like,
him, which is
that did
I think
not really boost my confidence, and he's
right.
like,
Well, this is again why I think he's like the best.
yeah. He's like, I don't care. I'm a robot. I just tell it as I see it.
Yeah, I said apprentice too. I meant Padawan, but
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Kind of. Yeah.
So after that scene, it's back to Ahsoka and Hera. They're at the shipyard and they're in this kind of like an overseer's box. I don't know what you want to call it, where you can kind of oversee the operations. There's a piece of equipment that Hera notices is too large for anything in the the New Republic's fleet, right? And kind of questions him on this, and he grabs this tablet and he says, "Well, that's classified."
Yeah.
And she kind of there's a little funny banter there
Mm-hmm.
where he says he needs authorization. She says, "Well, I'm authorizing it," and he's like, "I'm not sure you can do that," and she's like, "Want to bet?" So that was pretty funny. I liked that. Then you have this droid that he calls over and kind of gives him up unintentionally, right? Saying that there was this assassin droid who this droid came in contact with, and 5 rotations ago, I think was the actual quote.
Yeah, I think it was an HK droid, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool because the HKs were assassin droids back in the Knights of the Old Republic game 1 and 2.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
That's a cool callback.
Yeah, you get so in those games you get an HK that in the first one you find him and he becomes Revan's like version of C3PO, but like a murder hobo version of C-3PO. And then in the second one, you rebuild him, and once you've rebuilt him, it's usually around midway through the game that you end up being able to successfully rebuild him. And he's like, yeah, like my prime directive is to assassinate you. And you're like, well, don't do that. He's like, oh, don't worry, I'm not gonna kill you yet. And you're like, oh, cool. But yeah, it was a cool callback to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do see it's like series like this, like with the new Ahsoka, like they're keeping a lot of the callbacks are pretty subtle,
Yeah,
but
they got some
they're
well
keeping
placed
it right.
Easter. Yeah, they got some well placed
Yeah,
Easter eggs without just destroying some of the lore. I talked about last episode how there is some stuff that I don't agree with. In this episode, I didn't see too much of that, but
yeah,
in the future episodes, there will
right. So, you have the Empire sympathizers kind of stand up. The one guy yells, for the Empire, which is a little dramatic, but so
be.
fight
Yep.
breaks out there. Ahsoka ends up jumping through the window, going after that, the transport down there. She kind of comes into is confronted by a droid, and Merrick is down there. They battle it out. Right, Hera goes back to the ship. She goes after the transport ship. Ahsoka and Merrick. She ends up killing the one droid. She's battling Merrick, and through that battle, she doesn't end up killing him. And Shin arrives on a little transport ship, and Merrick kind of escapes with her. Meanwhile, Hera in her ship, and Chop, who's pretty hilarious, looking for the little tracker, throws a tracker onto the transport ship.
Yeah.
So kind of bittersweet there, success, but not what they wanted, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing we missed about the previous scene while they're sort of walking through that shipyard and trying to figure stuff out and realize that the entire shipyard is essentially ran by Empire sympathizers is this is something that foot stomps an issue that we found in Endor, where the New Republic at this point has kind of gotten so big that they can't really see everything. And they're trying to do the right thing by allowing old Empire workers to incorporate themselves into their new republic.
Well, they even say that in that scene about the Senate, how like a lot of them are old, Empire, and that they're trying to get to kind of I don't know what you want to call it, kind of integrate into the new system, right?
So, and that's the problem with like this giant galactic government that the New Republic is trying to create, well, has created and is trying to run, is that like there's always going to be people who are secretly dissenters, and they're too big to see that.
Yeah.
They see like the main council of this new republic, they can see like the big picture, but they're not able to figure out all the small cogs in the machine, right? So they don't know. Most of these people, most of these senators and politicians, they either don't know at all that essentially there are dissenters among them, or the ones that do know are supporting the dissenters. So
or they're just
like,
completely ignorant of what's going on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Half of them don't know, and the other half that do know are supporting it. So, and I think this is eventually what's going to lead to the rise of
the First Order.
Yeah, the First Order is like eventually these dissenters, these Empire sympathizers, are going to get powerful enough that they're gonna create their that's how the First Order is going to be made. It's not going to be one, for lack of a better term, one Snoke that just comes through with an army. It's going to be a bunch of people a little bit over time, more and more and more, that eventually they're gonna get strong enough. They're gonna get enough support, just like the rebels did. Like essentially, the First Order, I guess that's what we can call them. The First Order at this point in time are the rebels. The coin is
Yeah,
literally just
that's a
flipped,
good point.
right? So when you watch the show Rebels, no one in the like every time in the beginning of that show, whenever it would show like the Empire, like there's no rebels. Like, what do you mean there's a rebel alliance? We're too powerful for that. No way, Jose. Like, we run this galaxy and no one's going to be able to take it from us. There's no way that there's any force out there that's powerful enough to take us out. Right now, the First Order is how the rebels were back then. No one
Yeah,
thinks they even really exist. And the people that do think they exist are like, well, they're so small though. Like, why worry about that? They can't do anything. All they can do is walk around with their pickets and say, "Hey, we don't like you." They don't understand that it's a much deeper problem that is going to snowball into the future.
yeah, no, absolutely. All right, we cut back to Sabine. She's back at her home. She retrieves the Mandalorian armor. She cuts off her hair. You kind of back to the Sabine that we knew from Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
Tells Ahsoka by a hologram that she's ready.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It seems Ahsoka agrees. Right? They do eventually reunite. They're back on her ship, and Ahsoka calls her a Padawan.
Yeah.
They find out that the tracker that's on that transport, they located it. It's on planet Cetos, which is where we found Balon and Shin and Lady Morgan last. And that's it's a pretty short scene. That's pretty much it there.
Yeah.
We go ahead. Do you have anything to say? Add to that
Yeah,
one?
I think this scene just sort of shows how much subtle growth has happened just in this episode. Like, we went from last episode where, I mean, uh, those two were basically ready to throw fists, right? Or throw
Well,
hands. Like, they
even in
were,
the beginning of this episode,
yeah.
you can tell. I mean, Ahsoka's pissed, right?
Yep. Yep. And so, like, Sabine is realizing, I kind of messed up, and I maybe actually have been a pretty poor Padawan. Like,
Right.
Hu Yang was kind of a jerk, but he may have a point.
Well, so
Obviously,
and Hera was very instrumental in trying to push them back together as well.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, like, so when Hu Yang did his whole, "Oh, you're the worst Padawan," he's speaking solely from connection to the Force. Like, that's his
Yeah.
perspective. But obviously, Sabine reads into that, and she's like, and understands that she's not just a bad Padawan because her connection to the Force is so crappy. She's a bad Padawan because she's been obstinate at every turn. Anytime Ahsoka's wanted her to do anything, she's essentially done the opposite. And I don't
Well,
know.
and Ahsoka's not Master of the Year either.
Correct. And I think in this episode, like, we didn't really hit up on those subtleties in all of those scenes, but like, between Ahsoka's conversations with Hera and Sabine's conversations with I hate myself.
Hu Yang.
Hu Yang, there you go. They're both sort of figuring out where their own faults are at. And so
Right.
now we get to the culmination at the end of this episode where, like, Ahsoka at the beginning of this episode, if Sabine would have said, "I'm ready," Ahsoka would have been like, "Get bent." But now
Yeah.
Ahsoka's like, "Okay, sick." Whereas also at the beginning of this episode, if Ahsoka was like, "Hey, guess what, Sabine? You're my Padawan again. Have fun." Sabine would have been like, I'm out of here." She would have gotten out her speeder bike and slid underneath another starship and just taken off. But no, they both have grown as their own individual person and realized that maybe I did make some mistakes. And although I don't necessarily agree with the other one, they might have a point. And
Right.
so now they're they're ready to give it a second try, which is really cool because that's kind of, I think that's a big sort of thing with the Jedi is they are supposed to be about second chances,
Right.
especially
A good
with
redemption arc. Everyone loves a good
Well,
story.
I mean, look at Luke in what, episode 5, when they're like, "Hey, you're gonna have to kill Vader," and Luke's like, "No, dude. Like, I saw good in him. He can be redeemed." And we're talking about a guy who is shellacked thousands of people, and Luke is like, "Nah, there's good in that dude. I can
Yeah,
sense it, you know." So
yeah,
it's the same thing, right? Uh, just Star Wars in general. It's all about redemption and second chances and being better than you were before. So,
yeah,
and that's what they're both realizing. They're both realizing I can be better. I can do better. And so I'm willing to, you know, stretch that olive branch out and see if we can't actually uh, figure this out. It's really
yeah.
cool.
No, I like it. All right, we're back with I believe it's I forget her name, Lady Morgan, right? We
Yeah,
see the Eye of Sion.
yeah,
It's this giant ring of a ship. Um, that's obviously Lady Morgan's building, using it to, we assume, to get to this other galaxy where Thrawn is, right? Balon, they kind of it's Balon, Shin, and I believe Merrick is all there by like a hologram or whatever you want to
yeah.
call it. And through them talking, Lady Morgan kind of sees that Balon's a little apprehensive and asks, what he senses about Ahsoka, and he basically said, she's coming.
Hmm.
Um, the episode kind of ends with Balon saying that it should be a shame to kill her. There's so many few Jedi,
Yeah.
left. Um, and she says something along the lines of, "Well, are you sentimental?" And he says, "No, it's just the truth." Right.
Hmm.
That's another kind of nod to where you don't really know where Balon kind of stands in the whole, light side, dark side, Sith, Jedi, whatever. You obviously know he's not one or the other. I think he's some kind of somewhere in the middle. Kind of, you kind of see his allegiances are maybe not as black and white as probably Lady Morgan thinks, right? Like
Yeah.
she's all about, it's the Empire. We're finding Thrawn, and he's still. I don't know. You can kind of see he has his own agenda, right? Which
Well,
obviously we've talked about through this whole episode, but it's
yeah.
just another call to that.
And obviously this gets cleared up a little bit in future episodes, but I think this does actually, like, this sort of foot stomps that Balon is not a Sith, or necessarily even like a dark side user. He, much like, and we talked about, once again, we talked about this last episode. So this definitely shows that Balon still cares about not necessarily the Jedi Order. We've already talked about how he, much like Ahsoka, um, disagrees with how the Jedi Order acted, and and thinks that it should be done differently. But he doesn't disagree with the concept of Jedi, right? He's still
Right.
proud of where he came from. Misses a lot of the Jedi that he grew up with, and believes in the light side of the Force. Uh, he's it's not crystal clear what it is, but he's trying to do something. He's trying to fix something that he perceives to be broken.
He's
He,
definitely on a mission for something,
yeah,
right?
but
That part's pretty clear.
it shows that he's not a Sith, or at least not fully a Sith, because any real Sith wouldn't necessarily care. Like, if you talk about the Emperor or Vader in his prime, or any of the other, like, I can list off a bunch of other Sith from movies or books or video games, but basically all of them could care less about killing Jedi. In fact, most of them had the goal of completely wiping the Jedi out of the entire galaxy. Like, they almost saw the Jedi as an infection that needed to be eradicated. Balon does not believe that. Balon believes that it's more beneficial to keep the Jedi preserved, or at least the idea of them.
Right.
So yeah, it just shows that you're, like you said, he's not black and white, and he's not fully one thing or the other. He's definitely a man on a mission, and he's definitely somebody who is willing to do what it takes. Like he's uh the means just the end justifies the means type of guy. So he's
Right.
willing to do what it takes, but he's not necessarily happy with doing that.
Yeah. So that does it for this episode. What are your thoughts? This episode compared to last episode? Did you like it? Hate it? What
I
do you
feel
think?
like I feel like this episode had a much slower pace than the last episode,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I feel like it opened all of the characters up more. Other than the witch, like she's in it, but other than I want to go find Thrawn, really she hasn't really developed at all. She's just sort of
No,
been the same.
she seems the only one in this series. She's definitely the most like one dimensional character, right? She's
Yeah.
just kind of pure evil. Everyone else has a little bit of depth. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call her pure evil, right?
No, but she's
The
just
the
there's not a lot of substance there, right?
yeah, the Night Sisters themselves, I wouldn't classify as like an evil entity. They've done some messed up stuff, and they also deal with necromancy and all sorts of other, you know, immoral cliches. But to my knowledge, like the Night Sisters have never been like the ones that wanted to like destroy the galaxy or take over planets or anything like that. They just wanna practice their witchcraft and be left alone.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like this person particularly has done some messed up stuff, but she's also like coming from someone whose entire civilization has been destroyed. So I could understand that not only does she want to find Thrawn to get a little bit of revenge, but she also like she does have her own goals. Just none of them have really been alluded to quite yet, and we figure that out once they in the next couple episodes what she really wants. But right now, her only goal is to find Thrawn because she, wants the Empire to be back because the Empire supported her after her entire race and civilization was destroyed. The Empire was there for her, so who wouldn't want that back?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think this episode was a bit slower than the first one, but good builder episode, setting
Yeah,
up for
it was really
what's to
good.
come.
Yeah,
Yeah, I still even that this one was a little slower. I don't agree with all the I guess the critical
like negative
people that
reviews.
yeah whatever you want to call it, negative reviews. Oh, it's so slow. It's whatever. It's you're gonna have a little bit of that. You got to have some build up, some world building. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that's how you make a show. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't hate it so far. I like it a lot. So, um, well, that's it for this episode. We'll be back probably next week with episode 3, which is called "Time to Fly." We are 3PN. You can check us out on Facebook, YouTube. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions on a show that you want us to review, recap, any kind of topics, video games, whatever, you can hit us up at our email. It's pixelsplotsandparenting@gmail.com. And I'm Jake.
Yeah, and I'm Shane. I don't know if we really said anything in our last episode, but uh, like Jake said, we're not just doing Star Wars. We're you know, a couple of dads that are still very much big fat nerds. And so we'll be cranking out different kinds of content. I think right now this Ahsoka series is just sort of what's big for us. But yeah, any other sort of shows, video games. I think We're trying to get a D&D segment going as well. So any sort of kind of that stuff that you want to hear us talk about, see our opinions about, let us know, and we can, obviously if it sparks our interest, we are who we are. We're not going to go out of our way to like talk about or review something that we're not interested in. So if you guys want us to talk about our latest spelunking adventures, you might want to switch to a different channel. But yeah, any of this, any sort of video game nerd stuff, movies, let us know. And if we think it's worthwhile, if we're interested in it, we'll definitely dive into it.
Absolutely. Well said. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Deuces.